I never thought I'd be served legal papers by my own parents. At 32, I should have been celebrating one of the biggest milestones of my life, buying my first home. I had spent 12 relentless years saving every dollar I could, skipping vacations, living in tiny apartments, working overtime on job sites, even when my body screamed for rest. And now, finally, I had a key to a place that was mine. Not rented, not shared, mine. But instead of flowers, a housewarming card, or even a simple congrats, what I got was a civil lawsuit. It came in a thick envelope delivered by courier to my office. My assistant handed it to me with a confused look. "It says urgent legal delivery," she said. I took it, assuming it was something work-related, maybe a permit issue or contract dispute. But the moment I opened the envelope and saw the words, plaintiffs, David Carter and Elaine Carter, my parents, my hands began to shake. The rest of the page blurred as I tried to make sense of it. They were suing me. Not a misunderstanding, not a joke. My own mother and father had taken me to court over the house I bought with my own money. Their claim? That I had unlawfully purchased a property that rightfully belonged to the Carter family legacy, and that I must either transfer the deed to my younger brother Noah or pay them $600,000 in damages. I don't remember how long I sat at my desk staring at the papers, numb and unable to form thoughts. My coworker Ruby found me in the break room 10 minutes later, holding the envelope like it was a ticking time bomb. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Why would they do this to me?" Ruby, who had known my family situation better than anyone, just gave me that look, the kind that says you already know why. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. Instead, Ruby drove me to her apartment and let me sit on her couch in silence. My phone kept lighting up with missed calls. Mom, then Dad, then unknown numbers I didn't recognize. I turned it face down. That night, as I lay on Ruby's couch with her cat purring beside me, all the memories started flooding back. The favoritism, the double standards, the subtle but constant message that I didn't matter as much as Noah, that I wasn't meant for anything more than playing support to his life. And now they were trying to take the one thing I had earned for myself. Not because they needed it, but because he was supposed to have it. The next morning, I did what any responsible adult would do. I called a lawyer. The receptionist's voice was calm and collected as she transferred me to someone who specialized in family property disputes. I barely got the words out. My parents are suing me over a house I bought before she asked me to come in that same afternoon. That was the beginning of what would become the most emotionally draining, legally absurd, and personally revealing chapter of my entire life. I thought I knew my family. I thought I had already processed the pain of being the invisible daughter, the overlooked sibling. But what I discovered over the next few months, the secrets, the betrayals, and the truth about the house itself, would rewrite everything I thought I knew. And worst of all, this wasn't just about a house. It was about control. It was about tradition. It was about who gets to matter in a family and who doesn't. To understand how my parents could justify suing me, their eldest daughter, over something I bought with my own money, you'd have to understand how I grew up. From the outside, we looked like any other typical suburban family in York, Pennsylvania. My father, David Carter, owned a local construction supply business, and my mother, Elaine, was a stay-at-home mom who occasionally volunteered at our church and the PTA. We lived in a clean middle-class neighborhood, the kind with trimmed hedges and flags on porches. But inside our house there was an unspoken rule. Noah came first, always. Noah is my younger brother, 3 years my junior, and for as long as I can remember, he's been the chosen one, the golden boy. He got praised for every average achievement like it was an Olympic medal. Meanwhile, I could break myself striving for excellence and get barely a nod. I still remember my 9th birthday. I had begged, literally begged, for a telescope. I was obsessed with the stars back then. I even printed out articles about constellations and left them around the house as hints. On the day of my birthday, I opened a box to find a second-hand puzzle. Half the pieces were missing. I didn't cry. I was too used to it. 3 months later, for Noah's 6th birthday, He got a brand new telescope. Same model I had asked for, with a star chart, instruction manual, and even glow-in-the-dark stickers for his room. When I asked why Noah got the gift I had wanted, my dad laughed like it was obvious. He's the one who'll use it seriously. You hop from interest to interest like it's a hobby farm. It wasn't just birthdays. In middle school, I was accepted into a regional science competition. I was one of only 4 girls from our district. I remember nervously handing the letter to my mom, hoping for some kind of celebration. She skimmed it quickly, set it on the counter, and asked, "Do you think you could still make it to Noah's soccer game on Saturday?" By high school, I had stopped hoping for support. Still, I worked hard. I poured myself into my classes and graduated with honors. I applied to colleges on my own, filled out forms in secret, used library computers when ours at home conveniently broke. When my acceptance letter from Drexel University came, I cried alone in my room, not tears of joy, but of frustration, because I knew I couldn't afford to go. That night at dinner, I told my parents I'd been accepted, and my dad barely looked up from his plate. "You're better off doing something local. Maybe take a few classes at the community college, then find a nice office job." I asked if there was any kind of college fund. He just shrugged. "We've got something set aside," he said vaguely, "but it's for Noah. He'll be the one taking over the business someday. You'll probably be married by then." Married. That was always the plan they imagined for me. Not a degree, not a career. A ring. I did end up going to the community college, but I worked every weekend and night shift I could, waitressing, assisting at a warehouse, even cleaning houses during semester breaks. I took night classes in structural engineering and slowly transferred my credits to a state school where I finally earned my bachelor's after 6 grueling years. And my parents? They came to Noah's college graduation, gave him a brand new car, paid for his apartment in the city, funded his job hunt with connections from my dad's business buddies. They never once asked how my studies were going. But here's the funny part. For all that, I never hated Noah. He was smug, yes, and often clueless about how much easier he had it. But the real problem wasn't him. It was the system my parents built, where I was never expected to amount to anything more than background noise to his spotlight. And now that I had bought my own home, by myself, no handouts, it was like I had broken some unwritten family rule. I wasn't supposed to have something they didn't give me. I wasn't supposed to own a piece of the legacy. I wasn't supposed to matter more than the son they built everything around. And that's what terrified them. Not the house, not the money, but the proof that I didn't need them, and never had. My early 20s weren't glamorous. There were no backpacking trips across Europe, no spring break memories, no shiny graduation photos with proud parents standing beside me. What I had instead were double shifts, microwave dinners, and the constant gnawing awareness that if I slipped up even once, if I missed one rent payment, one exam, one opportunity, it would all fall apart. At 20, I was working mornings at a concrete supplier warehouse and evenings bussing tables at a small diner near campus. In between, I squeezed in online courses and night classes toward my structural engineering degree. I rented a room in a shared apartment with 3 other girls. My bed was a mattress on the floor. My closet was a rolling rack. And privacy? A curtain I hung up with command hooks. But I was proud of that life. It was mine. I didn't owe it to anyone but myself. Every dollar I earned was carefully split. 65% for living expenses, rent, groceries, utilities. 25% for tuition and textbooks. 10% into a house fund I started at 22. A dream I didn't tell anyone about for fear they'd laugh. My parents didn't know about the fund. Why would they? We barely spoke. They only called for holidays, and mostly to give me updates about Noah. "He's doing great at Penn State. He's interning at your dad's company this summer. He just bought his first car." They never asked how I was doing it. One Christmas, I saved up to fly home. I brought a handmade gift for each of them. Simple things, but thoughtful. I also brought a 3D model of a bridge design I had been working on for class. I thought maybe, just maybe, my dad, a man who'd spent decades in construction, would finally see me, understand me, be proud. But instead, as I carefully set the model on the table, he frowned and said, "Looks complicated. Are you sure you're cut out for that kind of work?" That night, I booked my return flight early and cried silently on the plane, a half-finished Christmas cookie still in my bag. It was after that trip that I fully stopped reaching out. I realized I'd spent most of my life trying to impress people who had already decided who I was, and worse, who I wasn't. So I buried myself in work. By 27, I was a junior engineer at a local design firm. By 29, I had paid off my student loans and finally moved into a studio apartment. 400 square feet, one window, but it felt like a castle. I built my own desk from scrap wood and painted the walls with leftover construction samples. I even turned the tiny balcony into a mini garden with potted herbs and fairy lights. It was the first time I ever felt at home. And all through it, that house fund kept growing. I didn't touch it when friends went on trips. I didn't dip into it when I got sick and had to choose between a doctor visit or just waiting it out. I didn't spend it when I desperately wanted a new coat in winter and just layered thrift store cardigans instead. That fund wasn't just about buying a house. It was about proving to myself that I could create something lasting, that I could build stability out of chaos, that I could choose a different path. When I finally crossed the threshold, when that account hit the number I had written on a sticky note 5 years earlier and taped behind my mirror, I just stared at it for a long time. Then I called Ruby. "I think I can do it," I whispered. "I think I can buy a house." She screamed so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. We celebrated that night with boxed wine and frozen pizza on her patio. She gave me a tiny plant in a clay pot with a note taped to the side. "For your first windowsill. Let it grow with you." It was one of the happiest nights of my life, but I had no idea that just a few weeks later, that joy would be stolen, not by strangers, not by the market, but by my own family, and by a history I never knew I was tied to. House hunting wasn't glamorous, at least not on my budget. I had no illusions of buying some picture-perfect, move-in-ready dream, home with a wraparound porch and marble countertops. What I wanted was structure, good bones, a place with history, with character, with enough flaws for me to fix and make it mine. My real estate agent, Lydia Parks, understood me right away. "You're not looking for a house," she said during our first meeting. "You're looking for a project, something you can rebuild the way you rebuilt yourself." She was right. Over the next 8 weeks, we toured countless properties. Some were falling apart. Some had bad plumbing, rotting foundations, or neighbors who stared too hard. Others were pristine but sterile. No soul, just gray laminate floors and soulless staging. I started to wonder if I was being too picky. Maybe I'd waited too long. Maybe I'd missed my chance. Then one Saturday morning, Lydia called me while I was at the hardware store picking up light bulbs. "I have something," she said, her voice urgent. "It just hit the market this morning, a 1915 Craftsman. It's a bit of a fixer, but I think this might be it." I met her at the address 45 minutes later. From the outside, it looked tired. Peeling paint, overgrown lawn, a sagging porch swing. But something about it felt familiar, like I'd seen it in a dream. The trim around the windows, the little garden path hidden under weeds, the stone chimney. It felt like it was waiting for someone to see its worth. Inside was even worse. Old linoleum floors, wallpaper from the Nixon era, a kitchen that hadn't been touched since the 70s. But the bones, my God, the bones were strong. Original hardwood floors beneath the carpet, crown molding with hand-carved detail, a fireplace framed in stone and brick, wide windows that let the light pour in like honey. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't fancy, but it felt right. We walked through in silence, room by room. In the back, there was a small sunroom, dusty and forgotten, but I could already see it. A reading nook, a morning coffee space, a place to breathe. "I want it," I said as we stepped out onto the back deck. Lydia blinked. "Are you sure? It's definitely going to need work." "I'm sure." That afternoon, we put in an offer. slightly under asking, with a quick close request and an as-is clause. The seller, the daughter of the elderly woman who had lived there for decades, accepted it within 24 hours. I was stunned, just like that. I was a homeowner. I texted Ruby immediately. "It's mine." She FaceTimed me in tears, holding up a bottle of wine and promising a celebration the minute I got the keys. A week later, I walked through the front door holding a single cardboard box, the keys cold in my palm, and felt something shift in my chest, like a door had opened inside me that had been sealed for years. I didn't tell my parents right away. Honestly, it didn't even cross my mind. We weren't close. I hadn't seen them in over a year, and our phone calls, when they happened, were stiff, surface level, and always ended with some backhanded remark about how Noah was doing so well or, "You're still doing that engineer thing, right?" But during one routine call with my mom a few days later, I casually mentioned it. "I bought a house," I said, almost lightly, like I was talking about buying a new coat. "Nothing fancy, but it's mine. It's in Westmore, near Maple Street." There was a long pause on the other end. Not a happy pause, a weighted one. "Maple Street?" she said quietly. "Yeah, a few blocks from that old elementary school." Another pause. "What's the address?" I hesitated for a second, then told her. She repeated it back slowly, then said, "Oh, okay." That was it. No congratulations, no questions, no curiosity. Just, "Okay." I shrugged it off, until the next morning. At 6:12 a.m., my phone rang. It was my dad. "Camille," he barked the second I picked up. "What the hell were you thinking buying that house?" I blinked, half asleep. "What are you talking about?" "That house should have gone to your brother," he growled. "You've crossed a line." He hung up before I could respond. I stared at the screen, heart racing, my hands trembling. What did he mean? Should have gone to your brother? What line did I cross? I had no idea. But I was about to find out, and nothing could have prepared me for the truth behind that house. I didn't sleep that night. After my dad's cryptic call, my mind raced with questions. Why was he so furious? What did he mean the house should have gone to Noah? Had he been planning to buy it? But if so, why didn't he? By morning, I was too anxious to focus on anything. I took a break from unpacking and walked the neighborhood, hoping the fresh air might help. That's when I noticed the elderly woman across the street, neatly dressed, watering her flower bed in a red plastic robe like it was a ritual. When I waved and introduced myself, her eyes lit up. "You must be the one who bought the old O'Malley place," she said, setting her watering can down. "I suppose so," I chuckled. "It's a fixer, but I'm excited to make it my own." She nodded, smiling gently. "You know, I've lived here since 1954. Watched just about every family come and go. But the ones who built that house, oh, they were something special." I tilted my head. "You knew them?" "Of course," she said proudly. "Harold and Vivian O'Malley built the place with their own hands. Vivian was a teacher. They had 2 kids. Their daughter, Margaret, moved away when she married. I think her last name became Carter." My blood went cold. "Margaret Carter?" I asked, my voice thin. She nodded without hesitation. "Yes, that's right. Wait." She blinked at me, studying my face. "You wouldn't happen to be related to Margaret, would you?" I was frozen. "That's my mom's name," I whispered. The woman's face lit up with astonishment. "Well, You're her daughter? Then you bought your grandparents' home, dear." I never knew what happened to the house after Vivian passed. I always hoped someone in the family might come back one day. I couldn't speak. The porch, the sunroom, the oddly familiar layout. It all made sense now. But why hadn't my mom ever told me she grew up here? And why would my dad call it Noah's house? I thanked the woman, still in shock, and went back inside. My knees nearly buckled the moment I stepped into the front hallway. I leaned against the wall, heart thudding. I didn't even know I was crying until tears hit the floor. This house wasn't just a good deal. It wasn't just a project. It was a piece of my family's past. A piece they'd buried. After I collected myself, I started digging. I pulled out the folder Lydia had given me during the sale, the title transfer, past owner information, dates. The paper trail was clear. The house had belonged to Vivian and Harold O'Malley until Vivian's death in 1986. After that, it was sold to another family. No mention of Margaret inheriting it, no trust, no transfer. My grandparents hadn't passed it down. They had sold it, or more likely, they'd been convinced to. I texted Ruby. The house used to belong to my mom's parents. She grew up here. She never told me. Ruby replied instantly, "What? That's huge. Are you okay?" No, I wasn't. But I had 1,000 more questions before I could even think about how I felt. That evening, while replacing old baseboards in what would become my office, I found something jammed behind the wall. A faded photo of a young woman, smiling, proud, standing on the very same porch I now owned. On the back, it read, Margaret, 1972. It was my mom, teenage, bright-eyed, hopeful, and standing in front of my house. I sat there on the dusty floor holding that photo like it might crumble in my hands. That young woman had dreams. She had roots here. She had a life long before she became the woman who chose to erase all of this from my memory. Why had she buried it? Why had she let my father rewrite this part of her story? And more importantly, why did they both think this house belonged to my brother and not me? The next morning, I got the answer. At 10:08 a.m., a courier knocked on my door with a delivery that required my signature. It was from David and Elaine Carter, a civil court summons. Plaintiffs, David Carter and Elaine Carter. Defendant, Camille Carter. Allegation, property purchased through misuse of family resources and violation of implied family agreement. Demand, immediate transfer of deed to Noah Carter, or $600,000 in compensation. My knees buckled. They weren't just angry. They were going to war. I didn't cry when I read the lawsuit. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel angry. Not at first. Just cold, hollow, as if the oxygen had been sucked out of the room and left behind the weight of something too heavy to carry. The pages outlined every fabricated accusation you could imagine. That I had knowingly and maliciously acquired property tied to a long-standing family legacy. That I had used funds gifted by the family, a complete lie, to purchase the home. That the house was meant for my brother Noah Carter as part of a pre-established inheritance plan, and that I had undermined the family's generational continuity. They were demanding one of two outcomes: transfer the deed to Noah, or pay them $600,000 in damages. I sat motionless on my kitchen floor, the faint hum of the fridge filling the silence. It felt surreal, like some bad overacted courtroom drama, except this wasn't fiction. This was my life, and my parents weren't bluffing. I called Ruby. I barely managed the words. They actually sued me. Within 20 minutes, she was at my door with coffee and her car keys. "Get up," she said, crouching beside me. "We're going to see my cousin Melissa." Melissa Turner was a real estate and family law attorney with a reputation for being sharp, steady, and compassionate, in that order. She welcomed us into her office like she'd seen this kind of family mess more than once. After reviewing the documents, she leaned back in her chair, expression unreadable. "They don't have a leg to stand on legally," she said. "But they're playing a psychological game. This is meant to scare you, pressure you into surrendering the house without a fight." "Well, it's working," I said quietly. I didn't even know this was their plan. I didn't know the house was part of anything. I bought it on the open market. I have the records. I have my bank statements. I used my own savings. "Good," Melissa said, nodding. "We'll need every document, every pay stub, tax return, loan statement, title history, everything from the moment you left home." She paused, then added more gently, "And Camille, I need you to be prepared. This won't just be legal. It's going to get personal. They're going to try to discredit you, twist the story. You have to be clear-headed and bulletproof. Can you handle that?" I swallowed hard. Yes, because the truth is, I'd already been fighting this war all my life. They just finally put it on paper. Melissa's team got to work immediately. By the end of the week, we had pulled. Full property history going back to 1915. Proof of sale in 1986, when the home was sold to a private buyer after my grandmother's death. Not passed down, not preserved. My complete financial history from the past 12 years. Zero indication of any money from my parents. But the most damning blow came from a source I never expected. My high school guidance counselor. Melissa's paralegal had reached out to dig into my college scholarship history. During a call with the school's records department, the counselor, Mr. Anders, volunteered something chilling. "I remember Camille," he said. "She was one of the sharpest students we had that year. I recommended her for the Claiborne Women in Engineering grant, a full ride." Melissa leaned in. "What happened?" Mr. Anders hesitated. "Her father came to my office, told me to withdraw the recommendation, said she wasn't ready, that she'd be distracted from more important things. He had written it down. It was in the records. They had sabotaged me. Even back then, they didn't just want me quiet. They wanted me small, dependent, disposable." Later that night, I pulled out a dusty old journal where I had scribbled dreams of owning a home one day. Blueprints, room layouts, swatches of color, torn out pages from architecture magazines. In one corner, I had written a quote from Maya Angelou. "I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it." I traced the words with my finger. This house, this lawsuit, wasn't just about real estate. It was about power, control, history. And I was done letting them write my story. The next morning, I filed my formal response to the court. It was on. The days after I filed my response blurred into a cycle of paperwork, strategy calls with Melissa, and short, fitful sleep. The house, which had felt like a sanctuary only weeks before, now felt like a fortress under siege. Every creak in the floorboards, every breeze through the drafty windows reminded me that this place, my place, was at the center of a battle I never asked for. And then came the message. It was from Noah. "Hey, I just found out about the lawsuit. I had no idea they were actually going through with it. Can we talk? Please." My hands tightened around the phone. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year, and even when we did, it was surface level. Him bragging about his new job, new condo, new car. Me politely nodding, never mentioning my double shifts or night school or ramen dinners. Part of me wanted to ignore him. Another part, the one that hadn't completely turned to stone, needed answers. So I agreed to meet. Neutral ground. A quiet cafe halfway between our lives. When I walked in, he was already there, nervously nursing a cup of black coffee. He looked tired, older than I remembered. "Camille," he stood up awkwardly. "Thanks for coming." "Talk," I said, sliding into the booth across from him. He ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I didn't know Dad and Mom were planning this. Not like this. I mean, they've talked about getting the house back for years. But I thought it was just fantasy. Some legacy nonsense." I narrowed my eyes. "You knew about the house?" He winced. "Dad told me growing up that Grandma's house, this house, was supposed to be part of the Carter line. He said one day when I was ready, it would be mine. Part of the family name. I didn't even realize it had been sold until he flipped out after finding out you bought it." "So what?" I snapped. "He expected the universe to hold it in a glass box until you were ready to claim it like a prince?" Noah looked genuinely ashamed. "I didn't ask for any of that, Camille. I didn't even know the house was on the market until after the deal was done. But now, after everything they've done to you, I can't stay silent." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He reached into his backpack and pulled out a thick manila envelope, sliding it across the table. "I went through Dad's study while they were out," he said quietly. "I thought you were exaggerating. I thought maybe this was just a misunderstanding. But then I found this." I opened the envelope. Inside were old property records, showing how the house was inherited by our mother, then sold under my father's direction within 6 months of her mother's death. a typed legacy plan document titled Carter Family Continuity, outlining how Noah would inherit all family assets, including reacquisition of ancestral properties. But the most damning item, a handwritten letter from our grandmother, addressed to me. The envelope was postmarked 3 days before her death. It had never been sent. I unfolded the letter, my hands trembling. My dearest Camille, I see the way they overlook you, but I want you to know I see you. I've always seen you. You have strength in you that reminds me of myself at your age. If you ever find your way back to this home, know that you belong there more than anyone else, not because of blood, but because of heart. Love always, Grandma Vivian. I swallowed hard, eyes stinging. They never wanted you to get that letter, Noah said, because it proves everything they tried to hide. I looked up at him, voice shaking. Why are you showing me this now? Because I'm done, he said firmly. Done playing the golden boy. Done letting them pit us against each other. I saw how hard you worked. I saw how they treated you. And I stayed quiet for too long. He paused. If you need me to testify, I will. My breath caught. This wasn't just a shift. It was an earthquake. The boy they raised to take everything from me was choosing to stand beside me. As I walked home that evening, the autumn air crisp and biting, I knew this wouldn't change who our parents were. They'd still come after me with everything they had. But now, I wasn't standing alone. The courthouse was smaller than I expected. Beige walls, faded blue carpeting, the kind of place that smelled like old paperwork and cold coffee. But as I stood outside the courtroom doors, clutching my portfolio of documents, it felt like the most intimidating place in the world. Melissa straightened the collar of her blazer and looked me in the eye. You ready? No, but I nodded anyway. Let's do this. When we entered the courtroom, my parents were already seated with their attorney, a man named Carl Benson, who looked like he'd never lost a case and expected today would be no different. My father wore that same stone-cold look I remembered from childhood. My mother wouldn't even glance my way. Noah sat in the back row alone. The judge, Honorable Denise Harrow, mid-60s, silver hair pulled into a tight bun, entered briskly and got straight to the point. Let the record show this is Carter versus Carter, case number 12708 regarding civil dispute over property ownership. Plaintiffs, David and Elaine Carter. Defendant, Camille Carter. Mr. Benson, you may proceed. And so began the show. Carl Benson spun a narrative so theatrical I could barely keep a straight face. He painted my parents as loving, selfless caretakers, claimed they had always supported me financially, asserted that I'd betrayed an unspoken but well-understood family plan to pass the house to Noah, the designated heir of the Carter legacy. He even used the phrase moral inheritance. Melissa whispered beside me, "Too bad we're not in a church." When it was Melissa's turn, her tone was calm, factual, and surgical. She laid out a timeline backed by receipts, bank statements, transcripts, and property records. I had been financially independent since 19. My entire education, housing, and career had been self-funded. The house had passed out of family hands nearly 40 years ago and changed owners 3 times. The property was listed on the open market. I had found it through my agent, made a legal offer, and bought it using entirely personal funds. When my parents took the stand, their testimonies unraveled like cheap thread under cross-examination. My father, when pressed, couldn't produce a single document showing financial support toward my life. We would have helped, if she asked properly, he muttered. Melissa calmly replied, "So you're saying the support was conditional?" He gritted his teeth. My mother tried tears. "Camille was always difficult," she sniffled. "We didn't mean to hurt her. We just thought this house belonged in the family." Melissa didn't flinch. "And what about the letter from Camille's grandmother? That you never gave her? Did it not suggest that Vivian O'Malley believed Camille had just as much claim to this house, if not more?" My mother's face paled. I don't recall that." Then came the moment I didn't expect. Melissa called Noah to the stand. My father visibly flinched. My mother looked like she'd been slapped. Noah walked to the stand with his head held high. After being sworn in, Melissa asked, "Mr. Carter, are you aware of any legal agreement or inheritance plan that designated you as the recipient of the Maple Street property?" "No, not legal, only my dad's obsession with the idea." "Did you ever request or expect your sister to give you the house?" "Absolutely not. She bought it fair and square, with her own money. She earned it." And then he looked directly at our parents. "And I'm sorry, but I can't keep pretending this is about family legacy. It's about control. You've treated Camille like she didn't matter her entire life. And now that she's proven she does, you're trying to erase that." There was silence in the room so thick it felt like the walls were holding their breath. For the first time in my life, someone in my family said the quiet part out loud. The judge looked at Noah, then back at my parents. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. That was clarifying." As court adjourned for the day, Melissa turned to me, her voice low. "We just flipped the dynamic. That testimony was everything." I glanced across the courtroom. My father wouldn't look at me. My mother's eyes were glassy, but not from tears, from realization that I was no longer the invisible daughter, that I had built something real, and that they had no control left. I didn't sleep the night before the verdict. Instead, I sat in the sunroom, the one with the cracked window and peeling trim, hugging my knees to my chest, staring out into the early morning fog. I didn't know what Judge Harrow would say. The law was on my side. The evidence was airtight. But this wasn't just about legality. This was about family and all the ways that word can cut you open. By 8:45 a.m., I was seated once again at the defendant's table. Melissa was calm, professional, flipping through a copy of our closing arguments. My palms were cold, my chest tight. My parents sat opposite us. My mother's eyes were rimmed in red. My father's jaw clenched so hard it looked like it might crack. Then the bailiff's voice cut through the silence. "All rise." Judge Harrow entered, her robe flowing behind her like a shadow. She took her seat, adjusted her glasses, and looked directly at me. "After reviewing all submitted evidence, testimony, and legal filings, I find no basis for the plaintiff's claims." A beat of silence. Then she continued. "The property at the center of this dispute was purchased legally, on the open market, with documented personal funds. There exists no legal agreement, trust, or inheritance plan obligating the defendant to transfer said property. Furthermore, the plaintiff's arguments rest on informal family expectations, which hold no enforceable weight in a court of law." My breath hitched. "Therefore," Judge Harrow concluded, "this court rules in favor of the defendant, Camille Carter. Case dismissed with prejudice." With one firm bang of her gavel, it was over. Just like that, I had won. But the silence that followed wasn't relief. It was shock. From across the room, my father shot up from his seat and walked toward me, face dark with rage. "You think this is a win?" he hissed. "You've destroyed decades of planning, your brother's future. You've embarrassed this family." Melissa immediately stepped between us, calm but firm. "Sir, I'd advise you to back away." But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I stood and faced him head on. "You were never building a future," I said quietly. "You were building a cage, and I just refused to step inside." My mother followed behind him, tears streaming down her face, voice trembling. "Camille, how could you do this to your own brother? To us?" Before I could speak, Noah stepped forward. "She didn't do anything to us, Mom. You did this. You and Dad. Camille built her life without your help, and instead of being proud, you tried to take it from her." My father spun toward him, disbelief twisting his face. "You ungrateful brat! Everything I've done, the connections, the support, the plan, was for you." "I didn't ask for any of it," Noah shot back, "and I don't want a legacy built on cruelty and control." A hush fell over the hallway. Security was watching us now. Melissa touched my arm and said gently, "Let's go." As I turned to leave, my father spat one last venomous line. "Don't come crawling back when the world breaks you." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. because I knew something he never would. I'd already survived the worst of it. Not the lawsuit, but the years of being dismissed, ignored, minimized. Outside, the sun was bright, almost painfully so. I blinked into it, dazed, but standing. Noah joined me on the steps. We didn't say much, just stood side by side, breathing the same air for once. Equals. After a moment, he said, "I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. To see you." I nodded, voice thick. Better late than never. The house waited for me. Not a battlefield anymore, but a reclaimed space. That evening, I opened every curtain, every window. Let light in, let silence settle. I lit a candle in the fireplace and placed Grandma Vivian's letter in a simple frame above the mantel. Then I sat down in the bay window, watching the dusk creep in, knowing something monumental had shifted. This wasn't just a legal victory. It was the start of something I'd never had before. A life entirely my own. It's been 6 months since that final court ruling. 6 months since I stood on those courthouse steps, finally free. Not just from the lawsuit, but from a lifetime of silence, manipulation, and quiet erasure. And in that time, I rebuilt everything. Not just the house, though that was part of it. The faded wallpaper came down. The old carpet got ripped out to reveal the hardwood floors I lovingly sanded and refinished myself. I repainted every room, chose warm, bold colors I never would have dared in my younger years. I transformed the forgotten sunroom into a light-drenched studio space, where I now sketch structural designs and work on personal projects on weekends. But the real renovation, the one that mattered most, was internal. Because somewhere between scraping decades-old grime from baseboards and planting herbs in the windowsill garden, I finally understood something. I didn't just win a house. I reclaimed my voice. I found a rhythm of life that didn't revolve around earning someone's approval. Ruby still comes by on Saturdays. We paint, plant flowers, drink wine on the porch, and laugh the kind of laugh that's rooted in survival. She gifted me a custom plaque for the front door that reads, "Carter House, rebuilt from the ground up." Noah visits occasionally too. We don't pretend to be best friends overnight. There's too much history to erase. But we've begun something better. Honesty. We talk like adults now. We share stories. Sometimes we sit on the back porch in silence, and it's not awkward. It's peace. He even brought his girlfriend by once, a school counselor, who told me she'd heard more about me than anyone else in his life lately. I smiled at that. Not because I wanted to be the center of attention, but because for the first time my name wasn't an afterthought in my own family's narrative. As for my parents, we haven't spoken. My mother sent one letter, handwritten, apologetic, in a vague, roundabout way. She said she still believed things could have been different, but she understood now that she didn't listen enough. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but clarity. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt, and that's okay. What I've learned through this storm is that family isn't defined by who shares your DNA. It's defined by who shows up, who listens, who chooses you. And sometimes, choosing yourself is the first and bravest act of love you can commit. Now, every time I turn the key in the lock of this house, I feel it, the power of my own story, written on my own terms. In the evenings, I sit by the front window with a cup of tea and watch the sky turn amber as the sun sets over Maple Street. The small plant Ruby gave me, the one from the day I closed, now sits proudly on the windowsill, thriving in its clay pot. It's grown, just like I have. I no longer need to prove my worth to people who were never willing to see it. This house, every beam, every nail, every inch of space, is a symbol, not of what I was given, but of what I claimed, and most importantly, of who I've become. This isn't just a house, it's home.